Social media platforms label thousands of posts for containing misinformation every day. In the late-breaking work Encounters with Visual Misinformation and Labels Across Platform, we describe encounters and attitudes towards these labels. While lab-based studies of interventions abound, there are few public studies of real-world social media contexts. This is important considering research such as from Avram and colleagues that, quote, people are more vulnerable to low-credibility content that shows high levels of social engagement. In other words, context-specific social factors change how people react to misinformation and interventions. This points to a need for more ecologically valid testing of interventions. While platforms currently conduct internal research on their own platforms, only a small portion of this is public. Given this, they may also be hesitant to adopt lab-based results that conflict with their own research. Meanwhile, researchers are pushing platforms for access to more social media data and ways to independently test interventions in real-world settings. As inaccurate, false, and manipulated media floods visual-based platforms like Instagram and TikTok, what may researchers do to better understand how people react to these experiences? Our studies explore ways for researchers to empirically understand perceptions and attitudes towards interventions across platforms, taking into account both the need to understand a controlled range of misinformation stimuli, as well as the need to understand what users actually encounter during critical moments in their lives. We explored possible methods over 2 studies. First, a 15-person interview study, next, an 11-day diary study with 23 people. In both, we recruited for a broad demographic mix of regular social media users exposed to low-quality news sources in order to ensure participants had encountered the types of misinformation we were interested in. Most participants self-reported following at least one source from the IFI index, which includes only sites with low factual reporting levels based on the media bias fact-checking methodology. The first study aimed to elicit reactions to a controlled and broad range of misinformation and intervention types. We also interviewed users more broadly about their news habits and experiences around platform interventions. Specifically, first we used triading to elicit comparisons to 3 possible labeling designs from Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. Then walked through at least 5 randomized video or image examples with fact checks and terms from the Media Review fact-checking schema from the Duke Reporters Lab. We then wanted to complement these reactions with a better understanding of the types of media people encountered in their own lives. During our diary study, participants submitted encounters with labels, as well as news-related image or video posts that made them pause from a strong reaction like outrage. We did this to get a better holistic sense of meaningful news influences in their lives and what they perceived as accurate or inaccurate. What we found? In short, across both studies, attitudes about platform labels were divided between those who supported them in good faith and those who found them biased or error-prone. On one side, what we term here institution champions, many expressed it was a platform's responsibility to make clear what was true or false. These participants leaned Democratic in the first study. In the second, 6 out of 13 examples submitted were rated as appropriately applied. They described these labeled posts above from Facebook and Instagram with terms like false information, lies, or idiotic, referring to the underlying media, or terms like grateful to show appreciation for the platform's information. On the other side, the anti-institutionalist doesn't want social media platforms, quote, policing their posts. They felt the premise of misinformation levels was judgmental and paternalistic. These participants leaned Republican. These participants also reacted with outrage to labeled posts, but with this feeling directed toward the platform and fact-checkers rather than the underlying media, using terms like angry, hypocritical, and stupid. For designing interventions, we found an American public deeply divided about whether to trust social media to determine and label credibility of posts. And while some labels effectively alerted users to false claims, others were discounted as biased or mistakenly applied without understanding the user's intent. This work highlights both the limits of these labels to inform the public when it comes to contentious, politicized issues, and also stresses the need to conduct research into interventions using techniques like diary studies in ecologically valid environments.